man possessed. Rusty also took it one step further this week.
And so much to talk about. It's not this rugby union show. Welcome back.
Holy moly, I called the Springboks by 3, and I don't think anybody would have seen what we saw at the Cape Town yesterday morning. Unbelievable result by the Springboks. I think a lot of people would have been a little bit worried about what we saw in that first week, but 43-10 was the final score, and the Boks were absolutely phenomenal. And I say that, Sim, they were phenomenal. We still saw a couple of creep in. So weird. We're going to talk about the records that have fallen and the high score and all of that. But in that first 10 minutes, the injuries in the first quarter, the handling errors, it kind of looked like continuation of what we'd seen at Eden Park. So I think what I'm saying is the scary thing about this Bok performance is that Rassie will still go back, look at it and say, we could have been better.
Yeah. First things first, 43-10,
Sure.
Springbok record against the All Blacks, which is happening only 2 years after the previous one. And I think Nelspruit was pretty close to being a record as well. That was 3 years ago. So I think, the tide has turned. And then over and above that, I think it's also the All Blacks' worst ever losing margin or score. So either way, massive result. And yes, I know a whole host of us said, the Boks would win, probably more out of hope than anything else based on what we'd seen. But yeah, if anyone reckons they saw 43-10 coming, they should be walked up and down the streets of Joburg and showcased as absolute liars. There's no way.
Shame, yes.
Exactly. Shame. Stop lying.
Yeah,
nobody knows the game, that well. No.
Yeah, I feel for
and not even the Boks saw that.
No. And I feel for Scott Robertson as well. Razor's going to take a lot of flack. I think a lot of people who aren't in New Zealand might not understand the nature of New Zealand rugby and what one loss means to absolutely everybody in the country, it feels like. And even if it were a 1-point loss, there would have already been pressure. The fact that it was a record-breaking loss, the third in a row, back to back, against the Springboks in Wellington means that the Boks should always play them in Wellington as well. But Razor's going to be under an immense amount of pressure. And I worry for the New Zealanders that they might go and do something crazy like say, oh, we need another coach. And I don't think that's their problem. The problem isn't the coach.
What do you think is the problem though? Because I'm quite interested to work out. I'm asking you the question, but it's weird. A big part of why I thought we could or would win yesterday was because I looked at their bench and I said their bench is not better than ours. So these days it's quite scary that you can look at a New Zealand side and be like, no, they've got weaknesses here, there, everywhere. In the old days, that just never happened. You would, to a man, all 23 would be these giants. So I am curious in terms of what you think the problem with, what the All Blacks is. I mean, is this another sort of Man United situation where it doesn't matter which coach they bring, the results will always kind of like be iffy?
Yeah, I don't know if there are many coaches out there in world rugby who would go in and make them immediately better overnight, almost like the Rassie effect that he had after that 57-0. We were at rock bottom. I think that the problem is multiple-fold. I think that player personnel, I think they're starting to look a little bit thin in a number of key positions. And I don't think that's necessarily the All Blacks doing. If you put on a Tyrell Lomax and you say, this is the best scrummager in New Zealand, and then you see the scrums and the way they were absolutely backpedaled. There was one penalty that they won, one scrum penalty where they fronted up. Besides that, they had absolutely nothing to offer the Springboks. I don't know. So yeah, I think it's that. I think the impact of the Springboks not being in Super Rugby as well, maybe to a small degree or a smaller degree. It was so fascinating for me to find out that guys like the young guys in the Springbok squad had never even been to New Zealand. I think it was Kanan Moody. This was his first trip to New Zealand. It's unbelievable for me. So there's a little bit of an unknown entity when it comes to facing the Boks. Yes, you've heard stories, but you haven't actually played these guys. So I think there's multiple issues, but more than anything, country of 4 million people, they already have maximized the number of players that they've got in the country. They've got a lot of talent. They really, really, really do. But do they have the depth when it comes to selecting forwards particularly? I don't think so anymore.
I also think the other thing that costs them is their selection policy of overseas based players, because the thing with New Zealand money wise, they're a lot like us and Australia in that they don't pay top dollar compared to the UK and France and Japan. And so when they let their players go, they don't sort of get them back. You look at 10, their only real option at the moment is Beauden Barrett. Yes, Beauden's still thereabouts. But he's been around for, 140 odd test caps now, which is scary. But you need someone to back him up. So when Richie Mo'unga goes to Japan, him coming back is not a case of saying, okay, we're calling you up. It's like he's got to come back. It takes a year for him to come back because he has to come back into the system. And then and only then, after he's been in the system, will he be considered for selection. I think that's a huge issue. There's just nothing, I just think rugby should allow itself to go global. I know that what this means in English is that you're now going to end up with domestic. You're now going to end up with domestic competitions that don't necessarily have your best players. But New Zealand, like us, like England, have been producing good rugby players for decades, and so you've got to trust that you're going to produce. You're always going to produce, and you've got to also understand that your profile of players is going to be. Your profile of players is going to be younger and younger. But what that also means is that your players are getting experience from a much younger age. I'll give you a great example. Ethan Hooker. Ethan Hooker went straight from under 20s 2 years ago and into the Sharks team. And he was playing not just the Sharks team, Sharks 15, playing Currie Cup rugby. No, he went into the Sharks team playing URC rugby because there was nobody else. And because there was nobody else, he has now learned to play at that level. And 2 years later, he's ready to not only play international rugby, but he's ready to play international rugby against New Zealand in New Zealand. And, and not just be a passenger and be a guy that makes a difference. And so I just think, people need to rethink, these sort of blanket selection sort of laws, like if you don't play here, you're not going to get selected. I think that's just dangerous. You making your rugby weaker because with more losses. I think a loss in this day and age, it's not such a bad thing for all of the teams, because when you really think about it, the Irish are insanely good as a team.
Yeah.
The French superlative. The English are strong. The Scots are coming. Argentina, there's a problem waiting to happen. Australia is very much on the way back. Then there's us. Then there's New Zealand. You look at all those teams. A lot of those teams. There are very few of those teams that can't beat anyone on a given day. And so to have that sort of weird arrogance that you should always step on a field and win, like it's always been, is exactly that. It's arrogant. Even for us, doesn't matter. Back-to-back world champions. Guess what? You can lose to Australia after leading them 22-5 at half time, and so on and so on and so on. I just think guys need to be more pragmatic. It is a different age in rugby,
Yes.
where there is so much knowledge around the world. Rugby is going global because Argentina gets to be the way they are because their coach is, has played and coached in Ireland, has played in France, and he's picked all of that stuff up and he's brought it back home. Their players have been all around the world. Again, same thing, and so on and so on. And so, like, what I'm saying is it's a global game. It's no longer a game where you're just going to get one team dominating the Rugby Championship. For years, we've called the Rugby Championship the best tournament in international tournament in the world. But, it was won by the same team. And when it wasn't won by the All Blacks, the team that did win it dominated. Look at us last year. And so my thing is, at long last, it looks like a competition. And that's what you should be pushing for. Six Nations is the same. It kind of like the same teams as well winning. This is a good thing for World Rugby. This is a great thing for World Rugby. So New Zealand shouldn't be embarrassed or ashamed. They should just find a system that will work for them to make sure that they're strong when they need to be strong.
Yeah, and in the new reality that you point out, I also think that one of the things that might have a little bit of an impact, maybe not to the degree that you see New Zealand taking a pasting to South Africa on any given weekend like we did this weekend, is the Pacific Islanders are also not necessarily automatically going to lose their best players to New Zealand anymore. We live in a world, like you say, where anyone can beat anyone almost, at least if you look at that top 8 on any given day. But we do live in a world where Fiji can beat England, and a Fijian youngster doesn't necessarily want to leave or not be available to play for Fiji. He might play in France, he might play in England, he might play anywhere in the world, Japan, but will still turn out for Fiji. Likewise for Samoa, likewise for who am I forgetting? For Tonga. So I think that also has a little bit of an impact. All in the game, and it's so good to see the regulars on the comments. So please, guys, do drop a comment and tell us what you thought of that result. We started off by asking, or Sim saying that no one would have called that one. I see Campo saying he called a Bok win by 10. Which is very brave, Campo. Even I was trying to be, it's very brave. I was trying to be very diplomatic. When I was on radio, I said Boks by 3 because I was like, all in the game saying New Zealand also has a potential player pool playing rugby league or in the NRL, which is true, earning big bucks in Japan. So it makes sense that you're not going to have free reign anymore. And on top of it, having seen the growth of rugby as a global game over, say, the past 20 years, the thing that struck me was it's actually slow growth. There's a lot of competition in terms of sports and entertainment, and I'm using that as a blanket, phrase. Sport is up against social media. Sport is up against other forms of entertainment. So you're losing a lot of youngsters who ordinarily would have, yes, you go to a good rugby school, you're going to play rugby, it's taken as a fait accompli, not so much anymore. And I think every country in the world has to reckon with that. But yeah, it's an interesting debate. And I don't know if that just means that the New Zealanders must be okay with being one of the top 3 teams in the world rather than consistently being the top team in the world. But as you mentioned last year, I guess it's been like this now for a couple of seasons. France have nicked off a couple of wins against them. Ireland have nicked to win. Argentina have nicked to win. We've gone great guns against them, in the last couple of seasons. So maybe the new reality is they're a top 3 side.
Yeah, but like also I don't want us to go too far down the path of, geez, what's wrong with New Zealand? You know what? 2 Saturdays ago, those guys beat the Boks, a Bok team with 17 World Cup winners. Yeah. So they're not a bad team. They will lose, like we've been saying. Rugby is less of a sort of, you don't have one team dominating anymore. But they just need to be pragmatic, like everybody else is having to be pragmatic in that you'll win some, you'll lose some, but the important thing to try and be now is to win the important ones. when you desperately need to win. And I think that's what, the Boks under, say, Rassie, have been doing. I mean, the only time I've seen them not win the important one for me was Auckland 2 Saturdays ago. I was like, I was so used to them, like sort of, if they want to do it, they're going to do it. It was the first time I'd seen them not be able to do that under Rassie. But you know what? Again, it's a lesson for us too. Just because you want it doesn't mean, you're not playing against yourself. You're playing against other teams. And so, that needs to be taken into consideration. Do the scary thing, though? We haven't spoken about the game, and it's like 11:15. No, that might help, because this is to react to the game.
This is why we're here. Yeah, in fact, that's what I wanted to do, because you were holding up that mirror, and you mentioned that first 22-0, that first half against Australia at Ellis Park. This is the only time that I've seen the Springboks match that this season. The Boks, for all of their dominance when it comes to scrums, when it comes to the set piece, although the lineout hasn't really been good, they've not looked great. There's been a lot of handling errors. There've been lots of penalties given in those matches we saw against Italy, against Georgia. There was a lot of concern. So I'd have to say this is the first time that I've seen them string together the type of performance we've been waiting for them to string together for a long time. And Rassie, I'm sure, would have been frustrated that we've just not been clinical. And what happened on Saturday is we were clinical, but delving into the game, I felt that first 10 minutes, so helter-skelter, 3 injuries immediately off the bat. And had Cheslin not scored his first intercept try, we would have been talking about a very different match, just in terms of what the scoreboard would have looked like then, the pressure then shifting onto the Springboks. I don't know if the Boks would have even necessarily gone on to win, let alone win big, had Cheslin not, I think, snaffled that. And it was an incredible little intercept, because he looked as though he was going for the tackle and got the ball, and off he went. Scored in the corner. He scored on his debut as well. And that's the thing about rugby, is you can run away and look at the score and think, oh, wow, it was one-sided. And it certainly was at the end of the game. But it's those little moments where the momentum completely shifts.
Look, what as someone who's been preaching about that 20 minutes against the Aussies, that first 20 minutes against the Aussies, where, it was just intensity, physicality, tempo, and it yielded 22 points. So I was kind of like saying, the day the Boks string that together, I generally am one of the people that don't believe an 80-minute game exists, simply because you're not playing against yourself. If you were playing against yourself, then maybe, just maybe, you can go for 80 minutes. But, momentum shifts are things that take place in a rugby game. And so I had said that the day they string it together, somebody good is going to catch it. And yesterday
you said it just a week ago. I think you said it on here. You said someone's going to take a rollicking, and it's going to be a good
team is going to get put away badly. And so that's essentially what happened yesterday. That first half, I think in the first 12 minutes, we could have scored 3 tries. We had an opportunity. We could have been 21 points up. There was Merger's name as disallowed try, the strip of Cheslin Colby. And then we went for a rolling maul. That was the very first penalty we got. We went for a rolling maul where we then lost the ball in the lineup.
Such a mistouch.
Yeah, you can't roll it. You can't roll it up if you don't catch the ball in the line. It's not, it's not very practical. So we could have been 21 points up. I remember thinking, geez, this is like Ellis Park without the points. Like this first 20 minutes, like Ellis Park completely without the points. And then they get into our 22 for the first time, and they score. And you do start to get, like you say, nervous and think, oh, is the air going to be let out from their wheels, or are they going to have resolution? So an interesting thing to come out after the game is Damien Willems says the backline players, the backline we all talked about, endlessly last week, because it was such an unfamiliar but brimming with potential sort of backline. He says they went out for coffee and they sat, and it was kind of like, guys, whatever happens, always fire a shot and don't stop. So that was their attitude. Like, it doesn't matter what happens. And so when the injuries came, when whatever happens, when the tide turned against the Boks and suddenly, they were in their 22 and needing Cheslin to make that intercept to finally, put points on the board.
Yeah.
It was actually their attitude. Their attitude was, whatever happens, don't die wondering, and just keep going. It doesn't matter what it looks like. And I really like that attitude. And, we obviously saw that. And, we talk about the older players versus the younger players. I'm pretty sure, again, like that, it gets a lot of people to say, you know what, maybe you should get rid of the old guys. But you know what? Cheslin is very much one of the older guys.
Yes.
And he is, and he was the guy that kind of like gave the Boks belief again, with both his tries, because, he scored, just before halftime, and then he scored, or it wasn't just before halftime, it was 25th minute.
Sure.
And then he scored just after halftime, which basically, it's the kind of things that the New Zealanders do.
Yes.
But it not only did it give us belief, it also kind of like, suddenly we were in the driving seat in the game, in the ascendancy. And so, there's still so much value for the older guys, Peter Steff presenting himself as the world's biggest wing for the kick pass. It's just like, poor Ruben Love, it's like, yes, I'm supposed to mark a wing, in this contest for the high ball, but he's not supposed to be 2 meters. He's not supposed to be 2 meters tall. Kwagga might have an ever young sort of spirit in how he plays the game, but he's one of the older guys. See, you get to the front row, Ox. Marks was good in general play. The line-out gremlins persist. It's not just his problem, but we still need those guys, and it was a nice sort of blend of guys, the youngsters having a go, and the older guys kind of like steadying the ship. Which is exactly what these guys have been trying to achieve. At long last, they've had that game that they've sort of fantasized about having.
Yeah, you talk about Peter Steff and All in the Game saying Peter Steff was fantastic. Will be 35 at the next Rugby World Cup. Who are his and Sia's long-term successors, and speaks to exactly this. But the one person who, well, not just the one. I mean, we had to go into that game without a Jesse Kriel, without a Damian D'Allender, without an Eben Etzebeth. So, it might not be wholesale changes, but I think Rassie's also proving to himself that actually these guys who are the mainstays, especially those centers, because there's no reason to drop a Damian D'Allender. He's always been decent. There's no reason necessarily to go without a Jesse Kriel. But then we saw what a new look backline could offer us, which I thought was absolutely phenomenal. And back to Peter Steff, also in a bit of a revived role as well. I loved to see him calling the line out. He took a lot of line out ball as well. He called it onto himself, and I thought did incredibly well. You almost forget, like, Peter Steff is a lock. He's a lock who's a retread at 7. And to see him actually operate in that role, though he had a different jersey number and with 2 other locks on the field, was, I thought, a moment of absolute brilliance by him. And I got to give Rassie credit. I mean, it's a weird thing that happens is the team loses, the coach takes a rollicking, the team wins, all the players get praised. Got to praise the coaching staff after they turn things around.
No, you most definitely have to. But geez, All in the Game asks a very difficult question, man.
Yeah,
Steff will be 35. I think Sia will be 36. Because Sia just turned 34 this year, so he'll be 36. Because also he's born in June, which means the World Cup will start after he's 36. Look, it's a tough question, but I think that the easiest way to answer it, that there are guys, as long as we're not trying to. I think that the problem that faces the Boks with 7, and this is one of the problems that have always happened, particularly with Bok rugby. So if you look at when the Boks scrum half was Fourie du Preez, we then got into the space of trying to make sure that everyone played like Fourie. It's not how it works. You've got to pick guys for what they can do. So when you do pick, with the blindside flank situation at the moment, what we suddenly doing is we're looking for another lock who can play 7. And what we're doing is, then you've got a guy like, sorry, I was about to bang in the back. Sorry. I heard it start, and I was like, oh, here we go. So you've got Ruan Nokia who could do that. You got Franco Mostert. That's kind of like how we now starting to pick. You look at a guy like Quibus Visa. I imagine he's another guy that's going to play like that. I think it disadvantages the young blindside flankers that are around. And the young blindside flankers that are around are someone like Elrich Lowe. Obviously he's injured, and you don't know which Elrich Lowe you're going to get back, because I think he did his knee and broke his leg.
It's been a long term.
So it was a huge injury. So you're not quite sure, what Elrich Lowe you're going to get back when he does get back. But that guy for me is the heir apparent. And then you if you're looking around at Currie Cup and URC level, someone like Rowan Fenter, he's got that mean spiritedness of a Springbok blindside. If you're going to be a Springbok blindside, you cannot be a cool guy. They can't talk about you as a nice guy. You got to be a bit of a doers. You gotta run over people, and you just gotta be a meanie. And he's got that, Ruan. But obviously he's got his game to improve. I don't think he has the same sort of mobility or work rates that Peter Steff has. So those are things he has to work on, and maybe some of his finer skills as a rugby player in general. So there are guys in the system that are big and willing. I mean, to even look within the Boks, Jean-Luc started as a blindside.
Yeah, he did.
He is a blindside, and he does have that, that mean streak once he's on the field. And so there are guys, but we need to make a decision in terms of, we need to sort of draw a line in the sand in terms of, okay, we got to fix this. Sia, for me, the ready-made, this is sort of the like-for-like replacement, because again, Sia's not an out-and-out fetcher to start with.
No.
He's not a as a fetcher, he's not a cat burglar. He's not a George Smith or a Richie McCaw
or so.
So he's not going to come in there and pickpocket you and you wonder what happened.
Yeah.
But he is a guy, he's basically an armed robber at a breakdown, because what he does is he just bashes a whole house down, counter-ruck, just make it ugly. By the time you get to your position, it's about as nice as shop soiled goods. It's not cool. You're like, yeah, I've got ball, but I don't want this. And that's what Sia does. So I think the nearest thing to ready-made sort of proper replacements for him, you would have to start with Pepsi Buthelezi, a former 8/blindside, who has been sort of dabbling at open side, because he's got, they want at the Boks, they still want the open side to carry a lot, and to be a busy guy who tackles a lot. So they, I think there's one guy. And then the secondary guy, I imagine, who hasn't gotten into the mentions yet, is the other Chituka, Emmanuel. Yeah. Emmanuel's a former 400-meter runner, and I understand he's got repeat effort for days. And he's a strong boy, he can carry, not afraid of anything. I think he's another guy we need to keep an eye out for. But these guys need to start playing soon, almost like end of year tour soon, to sort of see if they can, if they can make it.
Yeah, and you then raise another issue. All in the game saying, Super Bowl Joe saying,
yes, I'm so sorry I didn't make that point, Super Bowl Joe. That's obvious. That's an obvious one I skipped. Sorry, he's obviously another wrecking ball, waiting to happen. Yeah, sorry, that's the one guy I would have forgotten that. I probably should have mentioned.
Already he's already part of the wider squad, so maybe he will make an end of year tour. Maybe he does get a little bit more of an extended run. Rassi started the season with him as well. All in the game saying he agrees he has a 6.5. It's not an out. He's not
wrong. He's not wrong.
He is a 6.5. Which is fair enough. So yeah, I think there are options, but I agree with you. And one thing we have to be wary or mindful of is that the replacement is not necessarily going to mirror the predecessor. And that brings me to the fly half conversation, because we saw Sasha Feinberg Ngomezulu go off fairly early on. Obviously took a bit of a head knock, and you could see as he was going in for that tackle that he wasn't quite right. So he'd obviously taken the knock before that. And that change at 10, I thought worked out for the best. Mani is one of those guys who's always going to get a lot of flack when things don't go right. But when he does get them firing, boy, he gets them firing.
6 out of 7 off the tee.
Jeez, as well.
I was like, who is this guy?
Who's this? But in terms of the style of and stylistically, there was a difference when the two came on, because you could see Sasha immediately want to take on the back line, want to try and put someone away with a little, chicken wing pass or whatever it is. And then on the opposite end, when Mani came on, it was really about what Mani does. It's about those pinpoint passes and finding somebody, getting them into that gap, which worked out well, I thought, in the end for the Springboks. So Rassie will still be juggling the two, and the two do bring two very distinct styles of play.
Yeah, they do. I just think, I think I've said this a million times, in terms of Tony Ball, Justice, wherever he is, he's probably like tearing his hair out, like, stop calling it Tony Ball.
It's stuck now.
Yeah, look. In terms of Tony Ball, I think the best exponent of our three fly-offs is Mani, because of his distribution. Like, Mani's distribution does not get the credit it deserves, because there was whose try was it? Andre Stazen's try at Ellis Park, where he finds Jesse Creel on the edge. When he finds him on the edge, there is an Aussie there with Jesse Creel, but Jesse can actually make a little swerve around the defender, because the pass is so perfect that it'll find him where, after he's made that serve, he literally passed at two guys and found the one he was looking for. Of course, it didn't work in the second half with Swahili. You got intercepted. But what I'm saying is, as a passer, as a distributor, he's probably the guy who identifies space and exploits it. He is unparalleled in the box setup at the moment. But I think, by the same token, we all know that when it comes to 2027, Sasha will have grown to being the guy that not only can give a passable impression of Mani, because he's got similar skills, but he can also be relied on to play an almost totally different game, which Mani sort of in that Ellis Park game again gave the impression that he can only play one way, which is a dangerous thing for a fly off. So it's for me, it's. But the bigger issue for me is Sasha's so unlucky with injuries. Like, he doesn't go he never plays 5 games in a row. It's a concussion, it's a rib, it's a knee, it's a this, it's a finger, it's a that. There's always something. So we need to kind of be careful of doing what I'm talking about, which is, it's fine, Sasha will be our guy in 2027. And then ignoring the others, like Mani. Actually, we might need to sort of like monitor the fly-off situation a bit more carefully than we're doing at the moment, simply because the guy we put all our eggs in may not necessarily be around at that particular time because of one.
Does this not remind you of Colin Slade for the All Blacks? Young, talented fly half, the world saying, look at this guy, he's the next great thing. And then the injuries, unfortunately played a huge role in his development. So if you don't manage it properly, find yourself in another sort of Colin Slade type situation, because that's one of those names that people almost never talk about.
Yeah, look, I mean, it happens. Injuries will always be a thing. I mean, we still talk about what Bob Skinstad could have been. If you didn't have that knee. To be a professional sportsman, I've always said I look at anyone that wishes they were a professional sportsman, and I think you've got to be mad to want that, simply because there's the pressure. Obviously, all your skills mean nothing if you can't execute them under pressure. The second part is most of the time you playing in pain. And the third one is actually you need to be incredibly lucky. You need to avoid the injuries that will end your career. So those three things, can you look at them and be like, yeah, these are all things I really want in life? No.
Yeah.
I'm okay being a fat middle-aged guy because, yes, I might pull a hamstring just thinking about taking a sprint, but I'm not going to take a sprint, in pain. So it's, you still need so much luck to be able to, to play at this, at this level. And, here's hoping that Sasha has that, like sometimes those injuries are just your teething problems and not what you become, sort of an injury-prone player. Sometimes they're just teething problems. And from what I understand, Sasha's an incredibly professional guy, both about looking after himself physically and rehabbing. So, here's hoping that, those two things come out in his favor 2 years from now.
Yeah, as somebody who's been incredibly lucky, I think, when it comes to injury, incredibly robust player, never gets injured, is Damien de Allende. And, it just takes one injury to allow the other Damien to get an opportunity to start and show the coach something different. Not necessarily something worse, but a very different style of play in the centers as well. Sam, I can't believe we've been talking for almost 40 minutes. Let's quickly run through the rest of the players, and because it really, really was great. I love all of the.
We have to talk about Damien.
Yeah, we have to talk about Damien. We have to talk about Ethan Hooker. We have to as well. And I'm singling out players only because they shone slightly brighter than the others, but there were some other key performances in there as well, which I think are incredibly important. But Damien, 12, yes, I agree with your sentiment that he can play anywhere, but putting him at 12 changes everything. It changes the dynamic. It just opens up more gaps. He's a lot more daring. He's going to not just necessarily try and run into you like Dukes does, and does incredibly well in the 12 jersey, but it does create a little bit more on the outside. He was great.
That performance sort of made a case for going back to your 12 being your second playmaker instead of just a guy who trucks it up. Because I think, we had an interview with Tony Brown probably about 6 weeks ago. And Tony was kind of saying, like, this was a New Zealander who came from the system that produced Aaron Major as a 12. And obviously, they were playing against guys like Matt Giteau as a 12, who looked and who looked like a fly-off. But he was saying, no, we kind of like, we all resigned to that. The other playmaker in your backline is the fullback, which is, obviously the Philly role as we now like to see it. But that performance made a case for it because, like Damien asks so many unorthodox questions because, he'll get over the advantage line, not necessarily on physicality, but he'll get over the advantage line on feet. He's good use of the feet. And then, he's got insane tackle fight, and he's such an explosive and dynamic player in general that even if he has gotten in there, there's a chicken wing that might fly. There's just so many different sort of questions that he's going to ask you, which basically fixes the backline. Like you saying, it fixed once the backline is fixed because they don't know what you're going to do. That means space for the guys outside of you. So I think that's what that performance did. Incidentally, Rassie said yesterday that one of the, he's been off color. Damien was obviously played so little.
It was not so long.
Apparently, Rassie showed him a clip from Nelspruit when we played against the All Blacks in 2022, when he tracked back Caleb Clark and tackled him. And he kind of like
Park. No, there was Ellis Park.
Was it Ellis Park?
It was the week after. And we lost the Ellis Park game. Yeah.
So then he says he apparently said to him, "Do you remember this guy?" It's like talk about planting a seed, like, and so Damien went out not only to remind us of what he has as a two-time World Cup winner, but he went out to remind himself of himself, which I thought was incredible. And when he went to fullback, what I really liked was he pulled the strings with his boot. And I mean, obviously, you have to draw in the line at the right time, and you have to make an impact when you do, which he did.
Yeah.
I think when he passed out to Grant to then pass back into Andre Esterhuizen,
Yes.
that was him joining in from fullback. But he pulled the strings with the kicking. Either it was a grubber or or just an attempted touch finder. And I thought he was really, really good. Like, he was good in so many different ways. And I'm pretty sure he wasn't supposed to go 80. But the moment Sasha got injured, he was not suddenly going to go 80. And sorry, mate, it's you're up.
Yeah, and he did so well. Campo saying not forget Willems played more of the game at 15, fair enough. And which brings me, Super Bowl, Joe again saying, always surprised at how big Gaza is. He's a legitimate unit. He's also agile and light. Exactly that. He is a lot more physical than he looks. Because he looks like he's just light on his feet and whatever it is, but he can give it a good go. You speak about Grant on the wing. I love seeing that. He is actually so quick and so good out wide. Is that his best position?
Ask Will Jordan, he'll tell you.
Ask
Will Jordan, he'll tell you, because we all know Will Jordan is blitz. This guy had to turn and burn, and he still got there, tackled him short. That was insane.
He was phenomenal. I loved that. And, Kobus Reinach had a couple of knock-ons from the base of the scrum, which, there were some hands in one of them as well. I suppose it's going to happen over the course of a test match. Very quickly, Ethan Hooker. I was crying because we didn't get to see him in the 13 jersey, but gee whiz, if you told me that Ethan Hooker is going to play the next test match on either wing, I wouldn't mind. He was so good.
So when he was picked for the first All Black game off the bench, I kind of I put myself out there. I wrote that this guy is a test match animal. He's one of those guys. He doesn't look, he's all substance and no flash, and he does the right thing at the right time. Players like that are so underrated, because we kind of we like the guy with obvious sort of flair, but the guy you really should is especially in a test match, is a guy who's going to make the right basic decision every single time. And Ethan Hooker is one of those guys, and he's played like that since he set foot in the Sharks team. And so I kind of went and did that. And then obviously in that game, he was one of the guys that missed the tackles on Quinn Tupaea. Yes. And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, oh, geez, my big call. And I did it again when he started. I winked and I was like, no, this guy. So I was very happy with that performance, because, his performance was almost like in 3 stages, which was when the All Blacks were actually in the first half, and the All Blacks kind of, got momentum on their side. A lot of defending had to be done, and he did it particularly well. And then we kind of the middle part of the game, we started sort of taking hold of the kicking game, and he was at the forefront of taking. This is immediately after Fassi went, and he started taking control of that, sort of making sure that he was available, be it in defense or in attack, to pluck the ball out of the sky. And then he, as he grew into it, he started counter-attacking. You saw that counter-attack that ended up with, that was a Kwagga's try.
Kwagga's try was the kick to Peter Steff.
Yeah, it was a kick. I'm trying to think. Whose try was it? Geez, so many. See, this is what happens when you score 6 tries.
6 tries.
But anyway, he had that run where I remember asking, where are you going? What are you doing? And then he beats, after he's beaten 4 guys, it's oh, okay, that's where he was going. So he's been incredible. And the reason I've written so highly about him is because I've heard such impressive things behind the scenes about him as a rugby player, as a guy, and apparently as a leader as well. So he's a great investment. That's why they decided, if we are going to try and see if he has the minerals, we're actually going to do it in a game that matters. That's what I like about Rassie and his coaches. There's nothing I hate more than giving players an opportunity in a dead rubber. You've got to give the guys who you think highly of an opportunity in games where they will be properly tested, because then those guys, if they pass that test, it is almost the equivalent of playing 3 tests at a time. Whenever they play a game that matters. And so that's what I really like about it. And, guys like Ethan feels like he's going to have a Jean de Villiers type career where he's a center, but he's actually going to start his career on the wing until, a gap opens up in the centers eventually. I think he's going to have one of those careers. But you know what? I don't care where he plays. He must always be in the 23 because he's got the minerals.
He does. Let's try and be quick with the last few names. You talk about the centers, Keenan Moody, the 13, that is best position?
Yeah, it is his best position. I mean, he was a 13 at school. We change players all the time. What I liked about his performance yesterday was Kenan is sort of like languid. He runs like, J.P. Peterson used to. It looks like he's not trying, but actually he's deceptively quick. Yesterday, what I really loved about him was how animated he was. He was animated, talking. Yeah, he was getting angry. He was talking. He was pushing people around, and obviously, I mean, he was making incredible defensive reads in that 13, in that 13 channel, and he was so up for it. I really, really, really loved that performance. That's who I want Kenan Moody to be, because I think we forget that he's another generational talent in that backline. It's insane how many of them we have. Like, out of that 7, I was sitting there and thinking, we probably got about 6 guys who are like generational talents, which is insane to be able to mention, with guys on the bench still, consider themselves generational talents. You think of Miney. I mean, that's just nuts. But
yeah, Andre is saying reminds him of Slapchips, and he has got that sort of that energy. He looks like he's having a little canter. Meanwhile, he's really, really shifting that sort of energy as well. To fullback, where the question is, does Willie make a return to the squad, or does Rassie just say, look, we've seen Damien go at fullback, quite happy with his, especially playmaker role. We've got a fullback ready, because Apelele Fassi in a moon boot, that wasn't a great sight. Tells me it's going to be quite a few weeks.
Nah, you move on. I genuinely think as much as I defend the senior players, I do think that there are guys a line should be drawn on. Someone who's 36 already. The question becomes, what's your investment? What is it that you're trying to, achieve? So I personally, I would just move on to Damien, capitalize on the, on the fact that he's on form now. And you know what? He played 15 at the World Cup. And I thought he did an incredible job, no? So it's not like you're asking him to do a job he hasn't done. What you just pray for is that he doesn't get injured. Or if he does get injured as well, then you go the Sasha route. There you've got a guy who can kick well out of hand. He can attack the line because he's got the feet and agility and speed. And you just make a plan based on the guys you do have. I mean, you could still, for argument's sake, you could still take Cheslin Colby back to fullback.
And it'd be good.
I don't think many teams would like that. Nobody likes the idea of playing against Cheslin, unless you're a nutter. It was weird. I saw how Leroy Carter sort of like, got a sense of what it's like to play against Cheslin, when Cheslin sort of stepped him and sort of allowed him to go into the harbour in Wellington. Yeah. And he was like, you could see the disbelief. It's like, wait, how did that just happen? I had him. He was here. That's the problem with playing against that guy.
Well, before we move on to the forwards, and I keep talking because there is so much to this test match, and we're still on the backs. Let me talk about Leroy Carter, because he was the debutant on the All Black side. I thought he had a really decent test, considering, I mean, it was obviously going to be testing for a young guy like that, especially when your team is backpedaling and losing so badly. But the try that he scored was not just Carter and the way he finished it, was the way the All Blacks built up to it. I mean, they were side to side. They looked like the All Blacks. They looked so dangerous. They pulled everybody to the right-hand side of the field. All of a sudden, Boks are out of defenders. You could see the passes were crisp, a couple of really slick hands as well. That was a phenomenal try. And that was the try that made me think,
yeah, it's going to be one of those
a long day. Yeah. Yeah. But well done to Carter.
No, look, I mean, obviously, if you watch enough of the Sevens, you know what Carter's about. He's a proper player. So thankfully, we no longer live in a world which doubts the ability of the Sevens boys when they come to play 15s. I think we started that trend, and now everybody else is going, you know what, back these guys, because they have to be multi-skilled in that format of the game. And the rewards have been immense for anyone who's tried. Even in the Curry Cup, there were so many Sevens boys playing, and they did such great. I mean, Donovan Don, one of the Blitzboks, I think he's a top try scorer in the Curry Cup with 9. And so, those guys are incredibly good to have, because their skill set is insane. They've got the physicality to work at rucks. They have to have the ability to pass 40 meters both sides. They have to be able to tackle one-on-one, and usually it's some 1.95 meter Fijian. And it's like, sorry, you can't say, oh, I'm only small, I can't tackle this guy. So those guys from Sevens come highly recommended, and they've got they got an engine for days. And I love having the Sevens guys. I think they add so much more to the 15s game.
Talking about a 40-minute pass left to right, Andre Esteres, and you don't see that.
Listen,
you don't see that very often.
His performance. I saw his try, I saw his carry, I saw his whatever. But the one thing that stuck with me was the guy. I mean, you know me when it comes to Miney's passing, but the best pass all day of anyone in that game was Andre Esteres. It just landed
off the base.
Oh, dude.
What a pass. What
a big player. And people always think, oh, you should play flank. Dude, I like a flank that can pass like that.
It's good to have some Kiwis join us. Kelly Wait saying Kiwi here. Congratulations, guys. Great win, second half shutout. Kelly, I know it's going to be a tough day in New Zealand today. And I'll reiterate what we said right up front is I think the big thing for the Kiwis is don't panic. I mean, you guys have still got an incredible team. And this is only in the space of a week. And of course, this Bidislow Cup coming up. So a lot of pride at stake. Back to Eden Park as well. And I can't wait to see that one. But so nice to hear from somebody from the land of the long white cloud. Kia ora to you. There were a couple more. Grant on the wing was magical. Yeah, I said that there was Andre as well. How bad was Scott Barrett? I don't think he was too bad, but sure. The forwards just got completely overshadowed. Very quickly, let's talk about the forwards. We've touched on Peter Steph Totoy. I don't want to dwell too much there. If I had to highlight or signal out one guy who I thought is the unsung hero, for me was Norkia, Ruan Norkia in the locks, in the lineout. I thought he just ran all day. I thought the lineouts looked a lot better. There was that little fluff in the beginning where I think Malcolm got his timing a little bit wrong. But after that, he was contesting. He was winning. The one immediately leading to a try as well. I don't actually quite know what went wrong with the All Blacks on their own lineout throw 5 meters from their own try line. But it was a disastrous lineout. But Norkia bossed it, dominated, saw it coming, read it very, very well in the box, finished it off incredibly well. I mean, you could talk about obviously the props, you could talk about the scrum, but for me, the one guy who probably won't get seen as much after a performance like that, Norkia.
Yeah, he's an incredible guy, isn't he? Because he's clearly growing with each outing in the green jersey. And this is a guy, Rassie himself admitted last year that he was probably 6th or 7th on their list of potentials until injuries kind of like forced him, to have to suddenly play and start against the All Blacks at Ellis Park last year. But ever since then, apparently, talking to Jake White when he was still at the Bulls, like apparently that changed him completely. Once he got that taste of what it's like to be a Springbok, he just became this guy who just like was relentless in terms of, working on his game. His career, so like it quite weirdly mirrors that of Franco Mostert, another guy they thought was too light, not physical enough. But he got around the physicality thing. Well, not that I think he's not physical enough. I think he is, but he got around that talk with an insane work rate. And he's another one who plays 5 and he plays 7. And it's weird how like they genuinely have a ready-made replacement for Ruan Nokia. For Franco Mostert in Ruan Nokia, like as we stand. So I think it's incredible how he's grown with each passing sort of appearance in the green jersey. But Eggs, can I ask, are you keen to overlook Jasper Wiese and
no, what a performance, and it made me think this is one of the differences between last week and this week is the balance of the loose trio. Because Sia was able to operate in the way that Sia wants to operate as well, which definitely added something to his game. But Jasper, my goodness, there was that one little moment where I can't remember who it was he tackled, and you saw all of the Springboks immediately retreating with their heads back because he'd almost gone over the horizontal, but he let him down. Yeah. He kept his cool, he kept his head. And I thought that was probably his biggest test of the day. But what a performance. Last week we were talking about Augustus, Genre Augustus Truki. And sure, he's going to have to work very hard to try and unseat Jasper after a performance like that. In fact, any other 8. I mean, there's still Cameron Anakom waiting in the wings after his injury as well, who, to my mind, would have probably ended up at the end of the season being the starting 8 for the Springboks because he was just so good in the URC. But that would be a great performance for Rassie to think, sure, from absolutely no 8s, by the end of the season, we'll have 2 really good ones.
Yeah, look, I'll start with Jasper's performance. What I really liked about it was I think it was in Port Elizabeth when Quibus was being interviewed after the game, and the guys are like, "Oh, what was it like to not end up playing with your brother because he was red carded before Quibus could come on from the bench?" And he was like, I'll be brutally honest, I probably didn't expect to play with him because, he always gets substituted around like the 55th or 60th minute anyway. And so imagine now, like looking at Jasper and thinking he's got, he's coming off 8 weeks of not playing or however long it was. And thinking, okay, well,
6 weeks, yeah.
he can't go the full 80 because he doesn't go the full 80 when he's fit. When he's match fit. Now, how's it going to go? For him to have gone the full 80 and, is testament to the Boks sort of conditioning guys is, the way they work, because they always go on about how the intensity in training is almost like sometimes even better than, what they get in a match. And so that was clearly showing. And that's the first part. And then obviously, for him, he played like a man who owed the team big time for not being there for those first 3 games of the, of the Rugby Championship. But yeah, look, in terms of the guys that are coming through, we do need more. We need guys to push him. And the really difficult thing about, about Augustus, as a challenge, it will be that he's a lot more like Jasper than any of the other challengers, in that he's a big ball carrier, but he's quicker than Jasper. He probably has better hands than Jasper, which then means, he's got better skills. Jasper, what I love about Jasper is he's a one-trick pony, but one hell of a trick though. He will carry and he will run over you all day long. It's that simple. So, you talk about Cam Anakom, I suspect, again, to talk about a forward that probably would suit a number 8 that would probably suit this game that we're trying to play, this Tony Ball. I think he's probably the best guy to do it because he's got the athleticism, the skills. physicality, the speed, ability at line out time. So he's the most balanced of all the guys we have. But again, we need him to stop getting injured. We need him to string a few test matches together. And, then after that, you can stop and have a look and be like, okay, I need to play this guy because I need him to play this role. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
All in the game with a question there. Will any under-20s get called up into a training camp? Well, they already were in the lead up to Rugby Champs, and I've got a feeling that Rassie will have had a conversation about the long-term plans for that. We've been on for an hour.
I think the playing around with the kids is will be shelved for now. There's a Rugby Championship to be won. But I think that the best way to sort of integrate them is to keep calling them into alignment camps, maybe like a different batch, not necessarily the same guys, just to make sure that, because what happens is it keeps you interested. It keeps those guys, once they get that taste. Let me put it this way. I know there's all kinds of controversy and a dark cloud around him now. Asanati Ntlavaganye for years, he was, clearly overweight, but obviously pulling his weight, for the Lions at URC level. And when the Boks came in, roped him into the alignment camp, and they said to him, listen, dude, you've got a chance here. The moment that happened, a switch went on, and he was suddenly working like a madman. I know it's probably a bad example to make in the current climate, but that's what these alignment camp call-ups do for these guys. It just puts them into overdrive in terms of working on their careers, and also on their games in particular, because they give you like a full list of work-ons, things that you need to improve on a week-by-week basis. And by the time you get into the Boks side, actually you kind of like there or thereabouts already. So yeah, I'm a big fan of sort of keeping that line of communication open.
Two final thoughts before we wrap things up. The first was we spoke about Ruan Norkia, and he's got the best. He's got the best nickname I've heard in a couple of years. I don't know if you've come across it, Sim.
What's it? Sopas.
Sopas. Yeah. So
what does that mean?
Sopas.
Once my Afrikaans lets me down.
Yeah, but that's not.
Is this someone who's listened to Afrikaans press conferences for 20-25 years?
It's not going to change now, guy. But yeah, no. It's so Sopas is short for Soap Leopold, which for the Kiwis on board, or anyone who's not from South Africa, is a soup spoon. And you'll see the shape of a soup spoon is obviously very round, and that's because he was a skinny beanfold type fella, and his head was so big that his teammates called him Soap Leopold, and that became Sopas. So.
Speaking of which, the one for Marco van Staden, we all call him Eskom. Actually, within the Bulls, he's called Matras because he's always on the ground.
We're going to go through these nicknames. I mean, we started last week with Kaya and the Xhosa commentary nicknames as well. I think we need to have a more complete list. And then my last question to you about this game. We haven't even touched on Argentina and Australia, which is a sin because they've set up an incredible end to the Rugby Championship. The Aussies are going to be spitting fire. They want to win the Bledisloe Cup and prove that they're back. Argentina, likewise, maybe will feel a little bit like they made an early decision that they shouldn't have by playing one of their two matches in a neutral territory. I think works in favor of the Springboks. But we didn't even have a chance to get into that. But my last question to you was, is this potentially the end of talk of the bomb squad? Is it going to become a non-factor? I, for one, am really glad that Rassie went with 3 backs on that bench. He needed them, and he needed 2 of them in the first 10 minutes. So, that just brought to bear, again, the high risk that you take as a coach by not having enough of a spread on the bench. How do you see the bomb squad looking, or is it going to re-emerge here and there, maybe?
I actually wrote that question as well in my story about the game yesterday. It's just kind of like, do we still need a bomb squad? And I was making exactly the same point as you that, thank goodness they decided not to go with one, because if they'd gone 6-2, that they would have been in strife. or even imagine if they gone 7-1, because that would have been the reaction to losing in Auckland, wouldn't it? It would have made sense to respond like that. But, having not done that, if you look historically at the bomb squad this season, I don't think the bomb squad has done anything this entire season. Whereas the 5-3 split actually has done a better job. Even in Auckland, the 5-3 split, the guys that came on sort of made a big impression on the game, which is why we were potentially talking a draw, before Adi Savier's steal. And so it's one thing to go, yes, it's time, it's over. But I also think with the Boks trying to sort of squeeze as much sort of versatility into every player they have. You look at the forwards, you got Jan-Hendrik Wessels, he can play, hooker and prop. You look at Ethan Hooker, he can play both wings and both centers, and so on. And Damien Willemse, Sasha, Cheslin, with the Boks having started down that path, I imagine a big part of why they've done that is so that they could afford to go 6 or 7 or 7-1 split, 6-2 or 7-1 split. And so I don't see why they should shelve it entirely. But obviously they have to be judicious in how they choose how they're going to go.
Right, everyone, please do give us a like and please subscribe. I think we just 5 away or 10 away from 500 subscribers. That would be really nice. Send this along to anyone who loves a good rugby chat as well. We absolutely love the comments. Thank you, Anthony. You got in at the end there, and I didn't get a chance to go through your messages. And he speaks, Anthony, about the junior Springboks, the under-20s, Flekane, Pete and Uester, who've been to the last alignment camp. So I think they'll be probably still kept in the loop by Rassie. It also says Australia conceding 14 penalties was absolutely shocking. And we've got to talk about the forward pass. We didn't have a chance to talk about that because that was a bit of bad refereeing, although it didn't have an impact on the results, though it did have an impact on the log because, that Australia forward pass, which was allowed to stand, meant that, the Aussies got a losing bonus point. So it does have a direct impact on the other teams, in the competition. So that's a little bit of a concern. And what else was there? All Blacks may begin to slip down the rankings, says Anthony, if the Aussies manage to get a win. That's right, because it is that year of the World Cup draw, so it will matter. Maybe not so much for the top 3, 4, 5 sides in the world, but it will matter where you end up in terms of the draw come the end of this, season. To wrap it up quickly, your thoughts on what we saw, Australia versus Argentina. It looked like an even game again. Last week it went beyond the hooter. This week it went down right to the wire. Could have been won by absolutely anyone, which makes it, like you said, right up front, the best rugby championship we've seen ever, potentially, just because it's so competitive. But it was a really good match. Just that little moment at the end with the referee, and then the TMO not even going back to look at what was a clear forward pass.
Yeah, look, I'm one of the people that before the tournament even began, I said all 4 teams are a contention, and it hasn't been, I haven't been proven wrong. Argentina were good enough to beat a really good Bok team last year. If you remember, we only lost twice last year, and one was to Ireland, and the other one was to Argentina in Argentina, both by 1 point. But, when you consider that Argentina was the other team that did it, you would expect Ireland, yes, but would you expect Argentina? No. So that makes them an incredibly tough proposition. And the interesting thing for me is they've changed. They've changed the 9, they've changed the 10. I see Santi Carreras now is playing 10. I don't even know what's happened to Albornoz, who cut us to ribbons, who cut our defense to ribbons last year. So it'll be, it's actually going to be tough. So I agree with Neil's comment. I don't know about overpraising everyone. You beat the All Blacks 3-10. There is more than a fair bit of praise due. But by the same token, I take the bigger point, and the bigger point is Argentina will be incredibly tough. The only question about Argentina for me is, have they done the right thing by taking their game to Twickenham to obviously earn a quick buck from, because, you know, the South African expats will fill up Twickenham. You know, you'll probably get a situation where there's 75,000 of the people there are South African, and it becomes almost like a South African game. And so that's the only question mark I have, because I've asked this question again, which is simple. Would they rather make quick cash now, or would they rather make the kind of cash which would come to them as sort of maiden, inaugural rugby championship champions? I personally, I would have preferred the latter, because taking the game to Argentina would have given them a proper shot at that, especially against this Boks side, which has shown us that it's far from perfect. And so, that's the only question I have about Argentina. But everything else, they are very much a team developing at pace, almost at the same pace as Australia, actually, if you for different reasons, but, they're developing in exactly the same direction.
Yeah, I too agree with what you're saying there, Neil. Stopover, Argentina won't be easy. And maybe you missed right up front where I think we started off the convo by saying this is the era that we're in where anyone can beat anyone. And, if you're not fully ready or up for a match, it almost doesn't matter who you play. They can take you out on the day, and that goes for the Springboks as well. So much to reflect on. I'm going to be watching some highlights of scrums. That's going to complete my weekend, because those were so good to see. Thanks, everyone, again for joining us. Really love the comments, and do keep them coming. Share this with anyone who you think might enjoy the conversation. All in the game. Good luck to Akani Simbine and Gif Letluleya. They're in the youth in the athletics world champs in Japan and Tokyo. And Letluleya, I think, in his first heat, ran a sub 10. He ran like a
987, which is
987.
PB.
It's amazing.
One of my hidden gifts, X, is I'm an athletics writer as well. So
look at
that's very much my stuff.
Full of surprises. I know what you'll be watching.
And everything, but I can't wait to get off and watch athletics now.
Yeah, it's good athletics. So I'll see you next week. Everyone, thanks very much. Look out for us on the socials. And see you then. Well done to the Boks. And thanks to the Kiwis who were joining us online as well. Love to hear from you, and keep it going. Keep the comments going as well, and we'll try and get back to them. Cheers, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Hey guys, if you like what you see and you want to support the show, we want you to be part of That Rugby Union Show family. Then just hit the like button, subscribe to the show, tell your friends, make sure you join us every time we're on. Slap that bell harder than Rasifiance loopholes in World Rugby's rulebook. There are new episodes every week. Don't miss it.
In a country where 83 people are murdered every day, knowing the minds of killers isn't curiosity, it's survival. Subscribe to Profiler Africa now. It's free. Or become a member and help keep the channel alive. Remember, trust nobody. Welcome back to That Rugby Union Show. What a week it's been.
He's playing like a man possessed.
And so much to talk about. It's not this Rugby Union Show. It's That Rugby Union Show.